morning. I just have to do a few fiddles on the screen here. Well, let's sit together. Well, we can't not sit together. We are together. Sit together. Right? If you really look at what you say, you eventually realize that you might as well remain silent. While we're sitting and seeing if these few other people show up, right? I just say that our kind of extended Dharma community is very busy today. And so I thought maybe we can include some of that busyness in our sitting, right, in terms of appreciation. Right? And there are a number of people who are traveling down to Wangapeka now, so they're not with us because they're going to the retreat that Mary and I will fly down to next week. Down our community in Queenstown is today celebrating the life of Colin Forster, right? Who's a friend and student and practitioner and jeweler, and who died a little while back. And there'll be a gathering of Sangha there to reflect on his life and the effect that he's had on beings, right? The outflow, if you like, which is flowing right out now and touching some of you right at this moment, and you never even met him. It's mysterious how we flow together. And today also happens to be the birthday of Lama Mark, right? Who is a long time. We've known each other for more than 50 years. And we've had many adventures together. And today I find myself just thinking that may the kind of the luminosity and the kind of inspiration that pours out of him continuously and infects so many beings, that it can continue. And this is happening today. And at Wangapeka, some of you may realize this has been going on because you might have been involved, directly or indirectly. But at Wangapeka, they are today blessing the cabin that has been built for Bonnie and Matthew. And that was kind of the initial excuse. I think it's going to be a kind of teacher's cabin, teacher's residence, but they will be the primary users of it for a while. And it's been a huge effort of fundraising and people working, and good morning. Come in. Please have a seat. And so the Sangha is gathering together at Wangapeka, right, to have a kind of an acknowledgement of all this wonderful generosity that's given rise to this facility. And they too are part of this moment. So it's a very kind of full day for our immediate Dharma Sangha. The amazing thing is that, and you can't see on the screen. It would be nice if you could see the screen. Maybe if we were more high tech, we'd have a screen behind me so that you could see the other people. But we have people joining us from all over the world. And some of these people in other parts of the world have been directly involved with some of these people and projects that I've been speaking of. And some of the people who are joining us on the Zoom have no idea who these people are, right? And yet this is a beautiful illustration of how the kind of the web of connections, right, is spreading all over. It's just this, right? And it's continuous, and we haven't even begun to mention all the beings that are contributing to our experience at this moment. And the amazing thing is that we're not reaching out to catch them. This is all happening right now. We just sit down into the middle of this, and it's here. It's not there. It's not down at Wangapeka. Okay? It's not in Queenstown. Right? It's not in Brazil or in Canada or in America or in wherever you are. Australia, I have to throw in a few Aussies there. Right? But this wherever you are is here, and this here is immense. Although frequently we seem to forget that and act as if here is rather puny and there is immense. And I'd like to get to the immense. But let's just for a moment sit down into the immensity of this moment. Right? And let your breath be a support. Your breathing, the sensations of your breathing. It's kind of settling into this fullness. In the immeasurable expanse of nature in process, in faith and trust and wonderment, we give ourselves to this suchness, this seamless mystery of birthing and dying. Spacious, loving, with feet solid in the earth, we nurture the hints at blessedness, the myriad faces and masks of luminous knowing. Moving as this flow of compassion and deepening inquiry, we engage with all beings in ways that support the integrity, the stability, and the beauty of the entire field of life and living. For the sake of all beings, wisdom, compassion, non-clinging awareness. Sadhu. So today is actually the last gathering in this series. Right? There may be another series with another name sometime in some place, but that'll wait until after we get back to from Wangapeka before we sort of go and put things on calendars. And we've called this, although I've been referring to the sadhana of Samantabhadra, which is really a kind of, in my mind, a summation, if you like, of the entire field of Buddhist study and practice. It's kind of distilled into a process. Right? It's, from my perspective, it's a lifelong work. It's not something you just sit down and do for a week and I've done that one. It's not something you can understand by simply reading the text a number of times and then suddenly you understand it. Because the text, right, is actually written in your blood and bones of your living. This is the real text that we're studying. And so because I didn't want people to be so kind of focused on this esoteric idea of a sadhana of Samantabhadra. I mean, just the word sadhana and Samantabhadra means zilch to most people in New Zealand. Right? So it's not really communicating much at all. So I suggested that maybe we could forget about Samantabhadra at this point. We don't need to we've got enough stuff to figure out in our life without having to learn a whole lot of stuff from another culture in order to figure that out, right? And maybe eventually get back to some application to our life. So I'm suggesting, well, maybe we should call this actually a kind of practice meditation of primordial Dharma. Right? And I like the word primordial. I don't know how it sort of comes across to you. I mean, for some people it might mean really old. Primordial means really old. But for me, primordial, yeah, it's really old, but it's also really young. It's kind of fresh, it's continuous, it's immediate, it's this, boom, 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 right? It's this has been, this is ancient, but hold it, it just got birthed. Right? How can it be just birthed and it's ancient? Today is Lama Mark's Ancient Day. Right? When did a life begin? When did your life actually begin? Huh? And if you think you've got an answer to that, then whatever you come up with that answer, ask, where did that begin? And where did that begin? Right? And it's got, so in one sense it's ancient, and in the other sense it's incredibly fresh. And the word Dharma, as most of you realize, right, is a kind of big word in Buddhist teaching, but also in many religions that come from India. Right? The word Dharma is a very common word, right? And it means all sorts of things. If you look in the Sanskrit dictionary, you get about 3 pages of microscopic font right? Huge, right? Of meanings of Dharma. So it can mean things like teaching, or you might the teaching, or truth, or phenomena, or Dharma can mean thing, or object, can mean virtually anything. It's a great word. We could dispense with language and just go Dharma, 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 Dharma. You get it? So it kind of means all these things. It's context. You have to understand it in context. But for the purpose of our exploration here, I've tried to bring this home to people in a rather non-sectarian way. And if we look at the word dhar, right, we come from dharati. It's a verb. Dhar, it means to hold, to support. We could say to cradle, to nurture, to hold caringly, is to kind of cradle, right? But as soon as you're holding caringly, you're kind of nurturing, right? And ma is mother, right? And the study and practice of Dharma is the study and practice of how everything is cradling and holding and nurturing and mothering our current experience. Right? We are interbeing, we are interknowing, we are interdependent. Everyone knows this, right? And yet we act continuously as if we should be independent. Right? There's a huge kind of discrepancy between what our intellect might say. I've been for years, most of my life of teaching, I've been, very kind of taken up, right, with bringing together, in my mind, in my experience, studies of ecology and studies of Buddhist Dharma, right? Buddhist expressions of Dharma. Right? And, I came to the conclusion that actually in a kind of very deep way, they were essentially the same. And therefore, I concluded from that all people who had PhDs in ecology must be enlightened beings, right? And I saw how people had incredible, intricate knowledge of how everything is interconnected, food webs and, right, carbon cycles and, all the periodic, people could tell you how all the different elements are birthed in stars and gravitational fields and planets coming into being and autopoiesis and evolution and so on. And it's like, wow, it's all happening. And then they turn around and they act as if they're actually independent beings who are under threat from other independent beings. And I realized that what's missing is what in the early days I thought of was, I called it the ecological experience. It was such a horrible mishmash phrase. Come and have the ecological experience. Right? But in other words, we have to somehow, this practice and study of Dharma is to kind of move towards this becoming not an intellectual understanding, but a kind of visceral understanding. That while moment by moment we are cradled and supported and nurtured, you're cradled by the chair you're in, by the floor you stand upon, by the air that we're breathing, right? By our kind of social connections, right? And so forth. We're kind of like, we're right in the middle of this kind of web. And simultaneously, we are part of the holding and nurturing and mothering of everyone else in the web. So it's not a one-way flow, it's a two-way. It's like a mirror. Dharma's like mirrors. It's like you support me, I support you. We support each other being nasty to each other. I couldn't possibly be as nasty to you as I am without you being as nasty to me as you are. You understand? This is not just nice stuff, right? Insanity gets cradled and nurtured, right? A functional society is cradled and nurtured, and we cradle and nurture each other. And And this question, this kind of huge, if you like, ethical question of how do I somehow rise to a feeling of responsibility, take responsibility for what I put out into the world. And how can I appreciate what I'm receiving? And can I, at the beginning it's sort of like, don't. People come to me and say, well, these are very good people who are devoting their lives to helping others and so on. And they say, oh, I'm burnt out, right? I need more time for myself, right? So we need to, so I say, oh, that's good, it's good. You need to give some time for yourself, that's good. So they feel a bit better about giving themselves time for themselves. And then after they've given themselves time, right, for themselves, then they start feeling a little bit kind of, better, I need to go out and do something for others. And we're oscillating back and forth. And so, you see, there isn't an other and self, there's just Dharma. The very act of being supported, through the act of being supported, we support. Right? So this is what I call the primordial Dharma. And we've looked at we used the sadhana of Samantabhadra, which you could say in a way, like the full realization of Samantabhadra is the full realization of primordial Dharma, the way I'm trying to sketch it out. And but for the purpose of our exploration, we utilized about the first 5 or 6 sections of a much longer sadhana. So the sadhana is about 14, 15 sections or something. And it just repeats itself again and again because you sort of get the point, and then you really get the point, and then you really get the point. It's the same point, it's just this. It's utter simplicity. We spend our whole lives looking for it because it's too simple. Right? Because we're always looking for it over there. And so in the last class I did announce that I would very much like to dedicate a goodly amount of this session together for people to share observations or discoveries or raise questions or themes that they're finding fruitful, right? To share with our fellow walkers on the path, right? And it might lead to me making some further comments and so forth, but that are arising from your attempts to make this teaching real in your life, to make this Dharma real in your life. And a few people have sent in some suggested topics and questions, and I did write them down. I got them here, kind of. Right? But I think it would be really good if people could actually express directly to the group, rather than me just reading some kind of theoretical question and pontificating on about it, right? To get a feel, because I think it's really valuable to recognize the kind of friends on the path who are, in a sense, wrestling with the same conundrums. You might begin to realize that what you're wrestling with is a human thing, not just your personal idiosyncrasy. Right? It's So from that point of view, I'd like to even ask people who have written in a question to perhaps try to see if you can reiterate, or maybe the question no longer holds, which is fine, right? But so we don't have, I said we're spread out all over the lot, like this here and now is very big, and part of the big here and now is Stephen, who's running this Zoom meeting whilst being down beside Mount Cook in the South Island. So I'm not quite sure how if there's going to. Before I'd say, Stephen, can you keep an eye on the screen to see who wants to speak or something? But if the people on the screen like wave, get my attention somehow, or maybe Stephen's there, he might be able to kind of do this, and then unmute yourself. And I'd like to see if we can bring together the people who are Zooming with the people who are in the room. And at this point, I do have a little bit of the word, I wish we had another word other than apology, because I don't feel this deserves an apology. But I don't have another word, so I kind of apologize for new people, right, who weren't here. And I'm asking people to raise questions from all of this, and you're just, what? About what? Mm-hmm. But I have a feeling that what we speak about will still be relevant. And so let's go for this. Yes.
So for me, I'm still on the preparation.
Good.
Arrange yourself in a comfortable posture.
Me too.
Yeah. Which I sort of see as well-being. Mm-hmm. Which comes back to, what is the experience of me living my life? Mm. How's that feeling? And mostly it's quite uncomfortable, to be quite honest. And I've got to see a lot about that over the last few months, especially clinging, wanting things to be in a certain way, not wanting things to be in a certain way. And it's quite surprising the disruptive effect that really has on well-being.
It's surprising?
Yeah.
That's surprising.
That's surprising. Yeah.
Yes? Good.
Because I think, up until quite recently, I lived really in my head.
Yeah.
And I haven't really noticed any contrast.
Yes.
Because the head doesn't give you contrast in a way, in an experiential way. But as I've been working more with, the material you gave us, and I don't sort of have the relationship towards it that I've got to become like this. I mean, I just read it and I feel uplifted, and I say, oh wow, that's interesting. Something in me is responding to this.
Yes.
And it's got nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
The me that the 24/7 me. But so trying to get out of my psychology is what I call that, and just get back into it's not really my body, but because it's a bigger experience than that. It's really hard. Sometimes something comes and I think, oh, lovely, but most of the times it's a bit of a daze and a dream, really. Yeah. So I think this is what we've been doing together has brought me to seeing this clearer. Mm-hmm. And from that, I suppose. I'm not under the influence of my neurosis quite so much. I can have some moments of a little bit of where things are clearer.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I always thought the Dharma, now I'm using it in a different way, the teaching, was very unfair. I always thought it was really unfair because it's extraordinarily difficult at the beginning. And the better you get at it, the easier it becomes. Now, normally you think that you want to be a virtuoso violinist or something, so you start off just learning how to hold the violin, and then you learn how to you have very simple little exercises, and gradually they become more complex as you become more kind of talented. Whereas actually the Dharma is in reverse. At the beginning, it's terribly complicated, right? I got this to do and that to do and this to do and I got to balance this and I got to... And every once in a while in the middle of it all, usually when we're not practicing, usually when we're just for a moment, we kind of forget to fuss. It's clear. And then we go, oh, it's clear. Oh, how can I hang on to this? And we lose it. Right? And so, but gradually, it's a bit like, another metaphor. It's because I was raised in Canada, where we have snow. And so, you used to, as a kid, you'd make snowmen. So you'd take a little tiny snowball and you'd kind of roll it in the snow and it would get bigger. Right? Well, we all know this image, even if it's kind of almost common around the world, even in places where they don't get snow. Right? So the snowball gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But the bigger it gets, the faster it gets bigger. You know what I mean? Because there's more weight and there's more area that's picking up the snow. Right? Well, in a certain sense, like the kind of process of integration of our life is a bit like that. At the beginning, it might seem it's very slow. It's like we're working with this little tiny snowball. And it picks up a little bit, and then we kind of lose it, and it falls apart, and we try to start again, and so on. But as it develops a little bit more weight, and so on, and those moments, if you like, of less struggle. Someone asked me years ago, who'd been involved with Dharma for a long, long time, and he was a kind of an elderly gentleman, and he said, Tarzan, you're always talking about bliss, but I never experienced bliss. What are you talking? And he felt terrible that he wasn't experiencing bliss. You could have bliss, illumination, non-distinction, and I said, what about, never mind bliss, forget about bliss, right? You don't have bliss, that's fine. But what about times when you feel really good? And he said, I don't feel really good very much. So I said, well, what about times when you're feeling kind of just, okay, right? And he said, well, that doesn't happen too often, right? And I said, well, how about, times when it's kind of not bad? And he said, yeah, I do have a few moments when it's not bad. I said, that's it, that's bliss. Right? It's like, it is valuable when we begin to let go of some glorious image like bliss and well-being that's going to be great. And we kind of accept and celebrate the diminishment, the small things. But as we do that is beginning to, these moments you read the text, right? And because of you and the chemistry of the moment and so on, it might inspire you. At that moment, you are nurturing something that's good in your being. It's very simple. It's not like then you have to go and practice and take it somewhere. Just at that very moment, there's already something happening, right? And you stay with it. It's like there's something about just gently, consistently nudging, and gradually you'll start to see there's certain aspects you begin to feel you do have a bit of a handle on. You start to have a kind of a way of maybe not interrupting, negativity instantly the second you're aware that it's there, but already just starting to see it and find it, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. An awareness of it
If
is a big start.
That's positive.
Yeah.
Right? So please continue.
Okay.
Right? Yes.
I think mine's probably an observation that maybe turns into a question.
Yeah.
So my observation is, I think the last 6 months it's been quite important for me to really appreciate and recognise how with practice it's just vital to nourish, to re-resource, because probably like a lot of people, you experience that background kind of unease or dissatisfaction occasionally with life, and to have recognised, you know, the value of really cultivating that kind of inspiration, motivation, because it takes effort. You know, it's very easy to when you have that slight unease, you know, to just fall into maybe picking up your mobile phone and scrolling on Facebook or something, just to dissociate and disconnect. But in order to kind of, I think what I'm getting at is kind of that idea of falling back into love with life. You know, that kind of it does require that kind of inspiration and kind of commitment. So that's been really important lesson for me the last few months, is just to keep on with that inspiration and practice. I think you called it puja.
Yes.
Yeah, that's been really valuable. And part of that, and I think this kind of question comes in the context of you know, trying to cultivate a little space, which I do in trying to facilitate some mindfulness with others at times, do some sessions, and I kind of appreciate how in trying to help cultivate a space of doing that, it's so important for me to kind of fall back into love with life, and step into that kind of let go into that into being, into connected, immeasurable kind of way of being, and I think in kind of I recognise the preciousness of that and how vital that is in sharing with others, but I also kind of what comes up sometimes is this kind of sense of that discrete separate self that you were talking about just at the beginning, versus kind of into being, and just with that discrete separate sense of self, I sense what comes with that is kind of a clenching and a control sometimes, but I also sense what I've learned as well is kind of an appreciation of the inclusiveness of everything. So it's kind of, my question is, how do I reconcile that kind of, because sometimes it's useful, that kind of discrete separate sense of self, to kind of get things done, or there's a kind of maybe a place for this kind of egoic sense, so it's like, how do I reconcile falling back into love and that into being sense of life, also with this discrete separate sense of self? I don't want to demonize this separate sense of self.
But do we have two things that we've got to balance? Do we really have two things that we have to balance? Right? There's a phrase, or a term, if you like, which I kind of found useful for myself. I'm constantly inventing words for myself, and so I talked about translucentizing our experience. You know, so you know, it's like when I translucentize my experience, I render it my experience translucent, right? Which doesn't mean transparent, and it kind of vanishes. You know, you look right through it and it's not there anymore, right? So I wonder if you translucentize this sense of self, and kind of really on, you know, not when you're sort of just completely lost in it and off doing what you're doing. It's at another time, when you remember, when you've got the luxury to be able to do this, right? That you recognize there is present a kind of a sense of self, and then to just very gently, like, feel your way into what is supporting and nurturing and cradling and holding and mothering this current sense of self. You know, kind of like, get rid of that sense of self so I can get back to interbeing. let's and this takes, you know, there's there is a seeming duality that we walk on the path with, you know. One side of it is making an effort, and the other side is letting go. Yeah. Right? Just letting go, just letting it be, right? And And so people go back and forth between, making an effort and letting it be. And we can do this forever. Right? We never get beyond it. Right? But there is a fact in here. It is absolutely necessary to be able to let things be. And it's absolutely necessary to make an effort.
That's right.
Right? And it's absolutely necessary to do this continuously. Now, how does that work? How on earth do I make an effort when I'm being effortless? How do I have effortless effort? What are we talking about here? Sounds suspiciously like what Tibetans talk about when they talk about Mahamudra and so on, But never mind that, that's all terribly esoteric and it doesn't concern us. We're just talking about living. And the fact that sometimes we are attracted to a sense we want it to be more easeful, less effort. And yet at the same time we might recognize we need some effort. Right? And there is an aspect, if you like, on the path, these two qualities that I can walk with. Imagine they're your two legs. It's another way of speaking. So you're going to walk along, right? And you've got one leg is effort and one leg is effortless, right? Letting go. And so, the effort is, in a sense, we can train ourselves in this. We can habituate ourselves to effort, right? And effort is really, at the bottom of it all, it's a kind of degree of question and interest. That's the effort. Rather than, like effortless is sometimes, it's that disinterest, equanimity, disinterest slides in there. Almost like withdrawal, just let it all happen. Interest, right? It's like, right? Effort with strength, comfort. Effort, comfortable posture, and effortable posture, right? And so, as a bodhisattva, as an eco-sattva, right, where a lot of our training is, if you like, simply the strengthening of capacity to inquire, to be interested. It doesn't mean running over here or running over there, but it's just like right in this effortless moment, there's interest. This is the way we can bring it together. Right? And so like how can what's the likelihood of being able to be experiencing this sense of self, and then at the same time to raise the question, so to speak, what is it that's holding and supporting and nurturing and mothering and cradling this sense of self? How does the universe give rise to this sense of self? Right? Now the thing is that at that point you go, I'm one with the universe. And all of a sudden you can't find the sense of self. Right? It kind of disappears. Right? As soon as you try and grab at it, right, it disappears. So we have to do this very gently. Imagine for a moment that you're just in one of these days where everything is beautiful. Beautiful. Right? There's a flow of everything. It's like perfection. The smells in the air and the sun on your skin and the telephone is just who you wanted to talk to, and it's like just totally, absolutely, magnificently in the flow. And on that day, you risk starving to death, right? Because you don't make your lunch. And if you did make your lunch, you forget to eat it. Who on earth's making the lunch? What I'm trying to say is, even in your most magnificent interbeing moments, does that mean, you can't drive the car? Then who the heck's driving the car? Right? Don't think about this too much because it's quite off-putting. All these maniacs out on the road, who's present? Interbeing, and the rubber and the car and the wheels and the engineers and Ford and and history and genetics and right. The amazing thing is it impossible to have like an appreciation of larger things, or when I'm just doing this, driving the car, you're driving the car, right? But the trouble is that then it might be gripping the wheel, you're gripping the wheel, and you're kind of like, you're so gripping the wheel. Yeah, you need to grip the wheel, but loosen up, not too hard, right? And look out, right? No, but pay attention to the speedometer and check the rear view mirror. And we do this all the time. We're multitasking. Who's doing it? Right? Well, a sense of self, maybe. There's a sense of self. Right? And sometimes the sense of self is absolutely one, if you like, with the sense of interbeingness. And sometimes the sense of self seems to be an obstruction. And the problem isn't the sense of self, the problem is the obstruction. It's amazing. We want to meditate and have samadhis and all kinds of wonderful spiritual experiences, but actually just some fundamentally clear thinking would be really useful. Add that to samadhis and things, and you really got something that's interesting. But it's just I think you know this, but it's an encouragement here. To what degree am I separating this out? We create problems then we have to solve. Buddhism is a great creator of problems for many people, because you get these concepts and you add should to it, and then you got a problem. Right? Whereas actually Dharma, let's settle into this. Let's have the kind of valuing to explore this fully. Okay? And when we've come to a conclusion today, I'd like to just go through what I've kind of crafted, if you like, the words of this first part of the sadhana, and created what I've called Primordial Dharma, a daily meditation and practice. And it looks like a little sadhana, except it's sort of taken a little bit from the Samantabhadra sadhana, but a number of words have been changed and so on. It's been simplified. Right? And I think this is like something which, for some people, this could become a daily practice. Some days all you do is read it through. Gradually, it starts to become internalized. You don't need to read it through. The text itself is not there. The text is useful because it might inspire you. But when you don't need inspiration, you don't need the text. Because the text is saying, ooh, look at this amazing life you're living. Oh, yeah. Ooh, wait, how did you know that?
Actually, we have a question from Denise.
Thank you. Denise, if you unmute yourself, and we're all ears.
And happy birthday, late happy birthday greetings for you too.
Oh, thank you.
It's not such a question. It's I really like what you said in the last Zoom meeting about sometimes just take a piece out of the text and work, a sentence or a phrase, and work with that.
Yes.
I've really found that very useful, because quite often I'll get up in the morning with an aspiration. I'm going to be really, really mindful today. And at the end of the day, I think, well, I haven't been mindful at all. But one of the phrases I've been working with, is in the natural flow of whatever is occurring.
Yes.
And so I've memorized that, and I notice that it's coming up far more often during the day as a little memory phrase rather than as an aspiration. And it's becoming more meaningful, and I'm just becoming more observant and aware. And it's just, I just want to say how helpful it is doing that.
Yeah. Great. Great. And thanks for drawing our attention to this, because I said, read through the sadhana, or this practice that I've just posted it up on Green Dharma Treasury. So if you want a copy of it, and then the text is just there. It's only a page and a half or 2 pages or something, and then I've made some hints at how to work with it, which is more extensive, so you could work through it like that. But gradually, as you become more familiar with it, you will very likely find that you work with it more the way Denise was just speaking. That you'll find yourself just kind of moved by one aspect of it. Sometimes it's the words. The words can be useful because they can trigger a flow of thoughtful engagement. But sometimes it's not even the particular words that you remember. It's more like the feeling that are generated by engaging with that part of the work. This is what I'm working on. And it's not the whole thing makes a practice of primordial Dharma. It's like this syllable is primordial Dharma. This word is primordial Dharma. They're all potential doorways into the fullness of mystery of living that we are. And so you utilize that. It's useful to feel that you've got a kind of an internalized repository of juicy reminders for rich, meaningful living. Otherwise, what you have to do is you run out of juicy reminders and you have to Google it. You go kind of looking for Google rich, juicy living, right? And you get a porn site, that wasn't quite what I intended, and then it's like, we're kind of looking at, anyone seen any juice, like, oh good, there's a Sunday class coming up at Oregon, I'll go to that, right? Or, I'm going to have a retreat next year, or or something. The Dalai Lama's coming in another 3 or 4 years, or something like that. It's like wouldn't it be really handy, right, to have a whole lot of, like, just imagine for a moment that some of these ways of looking at the world, of engaging with the world, become so familiar to you that they are like friends, and you carry your friends around with you. And as a friend, sometimes they perk up and say something uninvited. Mm-hmm. Right? They say, hey, Jane, what about translucentizing that moment? Mm-hmm. Right? They go, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Where did it come from? It came, the sadhana doesn't really, any sadhana, right, doesn't really become meaningful life practice for us until we make that sadhana our own. And that might mean rewriting it. That might mean, I wrote about this in the thing. I said, rewrite the text, right? Replace the words. Put it in your own words. Because then it's like you're walking along and just your own intelligence is reminding you. And it may be, for example, that in the natural flow of whatever is occurring, cultivate a continuity of profoundly nourishing ease, suffused with serene alertness and vivid discernment. Right? And Denise is just repeating these words of Tarchin again and again and again and again and again. And every time she repeats them, she thinks Tarchin. Right? She's objecting to this. Right? It's possible that they could be just her own words. Even though, maybe they, like Namjal used to say things to us, and he'd say, just wisdom, compassion, non-clinging awareness. Right? So, wisdom, compassion, non-clinging awareness. And so I'm kind of repeating what he said. And so, but now I'm not repeating what he says. I'm just saying it. I've made it my own. Right? It comes from within, and these friends pop up and they say, oh, you know, he's looking a little bit dull now, and they pop up with good advice. Right? You don't have to kind of Google for the advice; it's all there. But in a sense, the effort that we're putting in is like, this is the training, if you like. We're putting in the likelihood that we're going to come up with good advice. It's called Sangha. It's like surrounded by a community of friends in Dharma. If we're surrounded by, you know, we have our Dharma work is a tiny little bit of our life, and the rest of the time we're surrounded by people who are just not interested in the miracle and the mystery and the absolute incomprehensibility of sheer existence. How on earth does life on the planet get going? What is it all about? Right? It's more like they're just concerned about who was right and who was wrong, and what was just and what was unjust, and how much does it cost. That's our community a lot of the time, and it's sending in subliminal messages. These are the questions that are worth asking. These are the questions, these are the engagements that are worth engaging with. Right? Whereas, like, if we had a community of friends in Dharma, the friends, I don't mean hanging out with a whole lot of people who have little membership cards to the community, you know, or you have funny clothes or secret handshakes or what have you to identify the sect or religion or whatever you belong to. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a community of friends in Dharma that live in our heart. But it's aided and abetted, right, by some amount of community of friends outside our heart. You know, and they could be, I've walked through my life with all kinds of people who died long before I was born. Right? Through their writings, through their poetry, through their art, through their, right? And now it's sort of become part of my life. So this is where it has to go, Denise. Keep going. This is a good direction. Right? Yes, Diana.
Hello, Tarjun and everybody. I would like to share how some of the words that you've spoken, not the sadhana specifically, but some of your comments that you've made about that and about making a toolbox for yourself. And I've been in retreat, so in a sense I have a luxury to look at things under a microscope, where maybe in your regular work days, one's not able to do that. So what I have found, starting to do the sadhana, expectation is in there about a certain level of calm needed, this idea, and then sensing around to what is actually happening and the feeling that is there. That thought about calm and checking in is like a jumping board in which to find out what's really happening. And then I'm gone in the sadhana, the words, the outside reading has become replaced. I don't know if I'm making much sense. It's hard to put into words.
Absolutely.
It's a process that's developed probably over the last 6 months in the study of compassion and loving kindness. And you're bringing to mind constantly that nothing happens unless you're actually here. Is the most basic and the most profound thing you could ever say. And so, having ignored a lot of aspects of my own being through most of my life, pushed them down, a lot of emotions, and just a very strong idea of what I thought I had to be. That's been stripped away in the retreat, and it's like going diving, and you see the little minnows and the little thoughts that, you know, now in the background, the I don't know what you call it, but it's just this constant little babble that goes on. It's like little minnows nipping at your feet.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you develop the calm more and go a little bit deeper, and that's like an analogy, you get bigger fish. And the bigger fish are maybe some emotions, and they will throw me off my calm doing my set. But actually, it's not a throwing off. It's actually what the sadhana is all about.
Yes.
Getting to see the fish and owning the fish, in the sense of accepting and seeing that those are really part of my being, and that I need all those parts, that not a single one can be thrown out, that they're all there alive. So what has happened is I have a mandala. I'm not a Buddhist. I don't fit into a Buddhist category at all. I don't really fit into anything, I find. But the idea has come up as a tool out of my reading of Buddhist practices of a mandala. And my mandala is a mandala of children. And you're talking about hospitalizing children and needing to be there for children. Is part of this thing that developed, this creative mandala that developed.
Yes.
Well, now when a big fish comes, and I think, oh God, what do I do now? I might drink coffee, I might eat chocolate, I might divert the attention for a while until it gets to a certain point, which seems to be getting less every time. And then I take notice that I'm running again. And so I'll sit, and it's as if I have a child right in front of me that's in distress. And, oh, I've gone again. I abandoned you again. And so I'm just there, not to say, oh, well, I know you're feeling like this because this happened and this, and that's not really true, and blah, 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 blah. It's totally irrelevant in that moment. All that really needs to happen is for me to finally get to the point where I'm present with that aspect of myself that I've labeled as a child, because it feels like a child.
Yes. Yeah.
Whether it is or not, it doesn't matter. That's to the experience.
Yes. Yeah.
And when I'm able to stay with that experience, the energy starts to shift. There's usually a huge outpouring of energy and emotion. But if I stay with it and stay in the calm and just be there for that child, in a sense, at a certain point, the thought comes up what it was. And it's not a thought that I'm coming up with my intellect. It's a thought from the past that's bubbling up. And when it goes, or when they all go, the little bit of bubbles, the calm goes deeper. And there's no child there anymore. They've disappeared. And there's just this radiance. And it's like discovering that all these children are actually little Buddhas or deities of a mandala that were covered with mud. And I thought there were all these muddy beings, but washing them clear just by being there and having a sense of loving presence allows them all to become clean. And then they just spontaneously turn into that radiance. So it's a process, it's a tool, it's something that comes out of working with the sadhana as a, I don't know, as a gauge, as a way of seeing where I am.
Yes.
And I don't actually have to do anything, but there is right effort. You're right. I actually have to make the effort to sit down and say, okay, we're not going to run anymore. We're just going to sit with this. And whether it's my grandmothers or my grandfathers or the people look down the street or the people in Gaza or Palestine, they're all children. We're all basically children still. We're evolving. And we don't evolve past that unless we can be there present for what is evolving and not trying to be somewhere else already. but just to actually be there is sometimes the hardest thing. It's a long roundabout thing, but it's what I find works. And I know it works because it fits my criteria now for my universe, which is my inner world and my outer world, whatever.
Yes.
It's not a question of whether it's real or unreal.
Mm-hmm.
Number one is, does it lead to more awareness? Does it lead to more wisdom? And does it lead to more compassion and loving kindness? And whatever it is, then wherever I am, whatever realm you could possibly imagine, it doesn't really matter as long as it fits those three criteria. So whether it's a dream, or whether it's this dream world, or whether it's what some people would call a bardo, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you're there for what's arising so it can continue to evolve. It's like, it's not even me, but it is me. It's all of me. And
Good.
And it's just amazing life, wanting to live and to live fully. And I'm going to not talk too much anymore, but I do have to say that most of my life I've been into a dark cloud, and I never knew why. And I still don't know why. But I would say for the last 3 years in this retreat, I wake up every morning wanting to die. Now I knew I wasn't going to do anything about it. I knew it was a pattern, and I just thought everything ends, everything's impermanent. And it ended 2 weeks ago. And I don't know what happened. It was just some part of my being that had been hiding. And I finally had the nerve to just turn around and be with that part that wanted to die, instead of always pushing it away, like, you shouldn't feel this. Or even to radiate loving kindness to it at that point was too much. It was just, okay, I accept this and stop running again. And since then, I couldn't find a reason to live. I sat with that for so long, and I rejected all the thoughts that come up, all the really good answers. And I actually couldn't find a reason to live. I had to get to that point of really recognizing I totally wanted to live for the first time, but not knowing why.
Mm-hmm.
And finally I came to, I just want to see what it's like to live fully. It's so silly. But
You've just reminded me of my mother. At the end of her life, she made one of these living wills, and she said, you know, no extreme medical procedures to keep her alive. You know, if anything like that, just allow her to go. And we'd had quite a long discussion, you know, with my brother and sister and my mother, and you know, getting everyone on the same page, and I was quite supportive of this. And then she, so I said, fine, that's good, right? I think that's a good thing to do. And I was down in my little hut on our land here, and someone came down and said, Tarshan, there's a phone call from Canada. Your mother's just been taken into intensive care. And so I said, okay. And so I came up and I phoned the hospital, and she said, oh, she's being prepped for heart surgery. I said, that's impossible. You know, and I said, you can't do that, you know, but what could I do? I'm on a phone here in New Zealand talking to someone in Victoria, Canada. And so I thought, oh, well, that's what's going on. And then about a week later, after she'd come out of her surgery, I finally was able to have a conversation with her on the phone. I said, Mom, what was all this about the living will and not having any kind of... She said, well, you know, I was thinking about it, and it occurred to me that this was my opportunity to see what open heart surgery was like. And then if I just, you know, I mean, give it a shot. And I thought, that's my mom. Anyway, you just reminded me of that. Give it a shot, right? But I think relevant for everyone is this sense of, you know, this is absolute fundamental Dharma practice, is to feel an increasing recognition that meeting the fullness of our living with everything we can bring to it is everything we can do. It's not all we can do, it's everything that we can do. And you know, you may even notice little side ripples, because when we do that, it tends to be supportive of others. And it can also be inspiring for others. Right? And so our journey and the kind of courage, the courage to meet these demons, right? Or is it courage? Right? I always think that the English word courage must have had some French root or something, and it comes from la cour, which is heart. Right? So actually we said, you have the courage. What we really mean, do I have the heart? Am I willing to love? Your question, Jane. It's like right there, like, do I have the love to meet with this? Right? Not in a, oh God, I don't have the love. It's more like the encouragement to this. On the bottom line, now, how can I be present with what's going on when I haven't got a clue what to do? Right? I mean, the image of the child and the inner child and, the stuff being associated with, because a lot of these habit patterns are very old. We can't see where they started. In a sense, if we trace them, we see they kind of go back to childhood. They've been going around for a long time. And so, it was all very popular. Psychotherapy goes through kind of waves of popularity, and so there was a time when it was all about getting in contact with your inner child. That was the big deal. And at the time, I was a kind of a serious monk. Don't give me this inner child rubbish, right? Rising, passing, right? Couldn't relate to it at all, But nevertheless, I was plagued by all sorts of patterns which had been going on for an awful long time. And slowly, it kind of dawned on me that maybe I had to make friends with my inner child. So I thought, right, I'm going to make friends with my inner child. So I sat down in meditation, and there my inner child came along, and I said, I'm going to make friends with you. And boom, gone. Right? And it turned out that I realized that the problem wasn't that I didn't trust my inner child. My problem at that stage was my inner child didn't trust me. Because I was always going to fix it. I was always going to try and explain it. I was always trying to improve it. Do you understand? Out of compassion. Right? Truly out of compassion. I'm going to fix you. I'm going to, right? And so I began to realize that actually that's why this kid had been so burnt. That a second anyone tried to fix it or deal with it or improve it or anything, he just ran away. And so I thought, well, I have to come to terms with my inner child, but I can't do that if my inner child isn't there. So I had to start becoming a little bit more quiet. So I had this image one day, which was such a fruitful image. I imagined that I was sitting on a park bench that was 1/4 of a mile long. Imagine such a park bench, it's like a, right? And I sat there, and my inner child came and sat on the bench at the very far end, because my inner child actually wants to come into contact, right? And so I just sat there, and I don't even look, because if I even look, he's gone, So I kind of look, and I pretend I'm not interested. I just focus with my breathing. But meanwhile, I'm incredibly aware that my inner child is sitting on the end of this bench 1/2 mile away. Right? And so I said, I'm not going to fix you. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to be here. I'm not leaving. And then I kind of glimpse out of the corner of my eye, and I see that actually the child shuffled along the bench a bit. It's coming a little bit closer. This took place I remember there was a time when I got really serious about this, and I sat down in my hut. right? I worked on this for about 5 days at Wangapeka in retreat. And you know, gradually over time, this little kid came closer and closer. And I saw this kid, this kind of, maybe it was from photographs I'd seen of myself as a 2-year-old or something, this little toddler kind of thing. And I'm sitting here, you know, serious monk in meditation, checking all this out. Meanwhile, this little kid's coming closer and closer and closer. And eventually, the whole deal was, I'm not going to fix you. I don't know what to do. I'm just here. And one day, the child crawled into my lap. And I was totally floored by it. So I wasn't expecting anything like that. I had this massive emotional catharsis. Right? And of course, we threw our arms around each other and so on and so forth. It was very lovely. Right? But it was by doing nothing except being present. Doing nothing except refusing to run. Right? You know, it's like and it's hard not to run. Sometimes it helps to have some support to not run. You know, and that's like friends on the path, sadhanas, practices which are meaningful to us, poems that are meaningful to us, you know, like reminders in a sense of something it's so simple. It's like, what are you doing? What's your spiritual practice? I sit on the park bench and wait. Eventually God's going to crawl into my lap. Right? But in a way, that's it. All this kind of Dzogchen, Mahamudra, Madhyamaka teachings and so on, Yogacara, the whole thing is just like unbelievable, agonizingly detailed analysis of the process whereby this very simple allowingness takes place.
And I just say, my experience has not been that it's gotten any easier.
Mm-hmm.
Not at all. It seems the fish just get bigger as I go deeper. And sometimes I only see a shadow of one. And it doesn't get easier. It always takes absolutely everything I've got, every time.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no room for thinking. That's what I mean by it takes everything.
Mm-hmm.
And, but the history or the times of going through that and liberating those energies that I call children goes into the process. It's like recycling. It all gets used for the next wave. And so it's always as intense as the previous one, but it's never the same and it's never predictable, but the process becomes trustworthy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good. I'm aware that our day kind of slides by, right? Bill asked a question about communication and speech, and Bill, it's a big question, but not here. How do we learn to listen deeply and speak truthfully and recognize that what we say matters? And it's not the meaning of what we say matters, but more like the tone and the texture and the flow of how we say that matters. And can you think of a texture or tone of how we listen? Right? This is the kind of what Buddhists would call wrong speech. Unskillful speech is a kind of a driving force for an awful lot of suffering. So yes, this is a question that really that each one of us needs to take to heart, right? You know, our tendency to want to some people fall into a phase in their life where they have to exaggerate everything because there's this kind of feeling that nothing's quite good enough, and so they always make it bigger than it is. You want to embellish stuff. You can't just be straightforward. You can't just, this is it. It's not good enough. Right? We have to, this is a big question, body, speech, and mind. I'd like to bring our session towards an end by reading through slowly the words of our text, right? You can download this text from Green Dharma Treasure if you wanted a copy. And I think I'll just read the introduction as well for you, because would you like to have a stretch? Just to have a little stand up and have a stretch, right? Everyone can stand up. You can come. I'll just read a little bit of the preamble and then we'll go into the practice, right? Not all of it, but the study and practice and realization of Dharma recognizes that everything and every being exists as a web of dynamic relationship. We are supported, nurtured, and mothered by myriad other beings, situations, and circumstances, while simultaneously, from the other's point of view, our very existence contributes to holding, supporting, nurturing, and mothering them. This mutual shaping is a fundamental truth. It is primordial Dharma. This short yet pithy text outlines a process of gradual attunement to a fundamental truth of Dharma. Think of your practice as gradual attunement. That's what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Just attune. Not trying to grab it, not trying to get the insight. I'm attuning to this. Right? Its words and verses encourage us to explore, to dance in and with a timeless mystery, one that is revealed and demonstrated in each movement and moment of our living. This is a way of natural blessing that is instantly available to anyone who, saturated with curiosity, integrity, and compassion for all beings, find themselves answering life's invitation to open their senses, their heart of empathy, and their deep commitment to supporting this vibrant community of a world unfolding in all its abundance. May these words inspire the blossoming of wisdom, compassion, and non-clinging awareness in all who receive them. And then a short poem, celebrating primordial Dharma, where meditation practice mirrors realization, where path and goal are not different, where what is studied or practiced is who is studying and practicing, where love and clear seeing perfumes the ever-fresh gardens of our lives and the lives of all living beings. Primordial Dharma is an ungraspable treasure. Fundamentally inconceivable, it is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good at the end. It mothers, holds, supports, and cradles everything. This ever-fresh dancing of creativity and wonderment. It's what I am. It's what I do. this primordial Dharma that is also you. It manifests everyone, mysteries unfolding, inviting investigation, realized by wise lovers of suchness everywhere, blessed. And then we come to the actual practice. To cultivate a profound recognition of primordial Dharma, first arrange yourself in a comfortable posture. And just do what you need to do now. Okay. Then, making friends with your breathing. Invite your entire body, brain, mind community to settle in the fullness of living that you are. Making friends with your breathing. Invite your entire body, brain, mind community to settle into the fullness of living that you are. Smiling, breathing, present. With an expanding appreciation for the spacious, open, interbeing, interknowing nature of this ongoing experience. Feel the deep stirring of bodhicitta, a naturally evolving disposition for cultivating both in ourselves and others our innate human potential for panoramic, multi-realmed awareness, ceaseless compassion, and love. Through encouraging and refining this immeasurable, all-encompassing expanse of spontaneous love and clear seeing, may we loosen the hypnosis of samsara and release into the ocean of continuously evolving collaborative creation. May we manifest ways of living that uplift all beings. And so at this point you're contacting a tremendously powerful aspiration. Bringing to mind my teachers and ancestors, along with my human and non-human companions on this path of life unfolding, on behalf of all of us, I take refuge in the true state of affairs. Spontaneously present, timeless awareness. Radically inclusive love blossoming in all its fullness. Vast, ungraspable suchness that is this living world universe. This is ever-fresh Buddha in action. Each one of these phrases could be fuel for months of meditation and exploration. I recognize, celebrate, and cultivate the paths, teachings, and encouragements that support our realizing the true state of affairs. Day by day and night by night, I bring forth generosity, wholesome relating, patience, skilled use of energy, a continuity of caring and inquiry and wise understanding. This is Dharma put to good use. releasing into a profound sense of being this continuously gestating mystery of communion. I am home. Continuous gestation. This is the experiencing of true Sangha, the fruition of all refuge practice. Gradually, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha appear to merge and mingle until we realize that each one contains and reveals the other two. This is a wondrous three-in-one refuge, the natural blossoming of primordial Dharma. It's where we all belong. Smiling, breathing, present, appreciating, offering, I deepen this confident, knowing experience of refuge. To the Bodhisattva vow. However innumerable beings are, I vow to meet them with kindness and interest. However inexhaustible the states of suffering are, I vow to touch them with patience, love, and skillful response. However immeasurable the dharmas are, I vow to explore them deeply and thoroughly. However incomparable the mystery of interbeing, I vow to surrender within it fully. From this day forth, with wisdom and compassion as my lamp and staff, I dedicate all my life energies to the welfare of all beings. Smiling, breathing, present, appreciating, offering. I abide continuously in this heartfelt aspiration, allowing it to become well established and unshakably firm. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be apart from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all beings be filled with joy when sensing the wholesome activity of others. May all beings be graced with the serenity of unshakable mindfulness and loving presence. And all of these gradually bring us to what's called the essential practice. In the natural flowing of whatever is occurring, cultivate a continuity of profoundly nourishing ease, suffused with serene alertness and vivid discernment. Whether sitting, standing, lying down, or walking, allow everything to rest in its own place. To rest in the unique, ever-fresh fullness and vastness of being becoming that it is. And finally, a dedication. Through practicing these meditations, may I realize the essential union of profound engagement and utter peace. Cultivating this openness of being in an ever-widening mandala of situations and circumstances, may I traverse the path of great bodhisattvas. May I and all beings come to realize the natural way of abiding, this ever-present blessing of primordial Dharma that we are. By the power of this wholesome activity, may our lives be rich with awakening. Living thus, may we abandon all unwholesomeness through the endless storm of birth, illness, old age, and death. May we help all beings to realize their true interbeing, interknowing nature. Sarvamangalam, Sarvamangalam, Sarvamangalam. There are a considerable number of pages follow, giving hints at the possibilities of working with this text. And this is really a summation of, this is what we've been looking at over the last 6 or 7 months of gathering here, going into each part in a little bit more detail, hopefully just awakening a kind of a refreshing, if you like, a recognition of how extraordinarily engaging and juicy this is. And at that point you start to realize that the whole sadhana is right there in the preparation. Okay? Discover what it means to have a comfortable posture of emotion, postures of emotion, postures of physiology, postures of conceptualizing, right? A disposition, a way of relating to the world. It's like something that gives us strength, comfortable. It's strengthening of us. And then okay, that's my practice. And then making friends with the breathing, finding the kind of tactile, kinesthetic sense of friendship. What's the tactile, kinesthetic sense of friendship when friendship is going in your being? Can you bring that to your breathing? Right? This is like we're dropping into this. It's not practicing this from the outside, trying to put something in, but dropping into it. Then making friends with our breathing. Invite. Don't command. Don't demand. Don't order your body, mind, your body, brain to relax. Right? But invite. You know, when we invite you to come, but you don't have to come. Mary sends out the invitations once a month. We have no idea who's going to show up. Right? It's an invitation. It's freely given. And we sit here, and afterwards Mary and I spend the rest of the day grumbling about all the people who said they were going to come but didn't, and all the people who phoned up and said they weren't coming and then showed up, you know. And it was like, you know, I mean, you're not doing, look, like people approach their meditation, I'm supposed to have calm, I'm supposed to be loving, I'm supposed to have a bodhisattva attitude, right? It doesn't work that way. There's a kind of very gentle kind of, like, as if it's not even important. I'm just going to sit on this bench and invite you to come. But you don't have to come, right? Just, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here for you. This is an invitation. Invite your entire body, brain, mind community. I'm a community of living beings, right? Like when you get me, you get my mom. When you get me, you get my bacteria. When you get me, you get my kidneys. You know, we want tartine, but we don't want the kidneys. You know, you get the hair, the lack of hair. You also get the foibles, and you get the humor, and you get the kind of talents, and you get the shortcomings. Right? You get the full Monty. Right? The community. I am community. Not I don't have any community. You, if you exist, you already are community. Recognize this. Recognize your mind, this field of knowing that you are. Feelings, thoughts, right? Imaginations. This is like, and it's weaving with our physiology, our nervous system, our synapsings, our hormonal beating hearts, our circulating blood, the whole thing, and everything's affecting everything else. And this is like, invite this body-brain community to settle into the fullness of living that it is. We're not asking you to go anywhere. Right? Maybe the fullness of living that I am right now is grumpy. Right? It's like, wow, I've been successful. I'm grumpy, settled in grumpiness. Right? I'm not sort of grumpy over here, but the real me is not grumpy. And is rather embarrassed that I'm grumpy today. God, we torture ourselves with this, right? So within the very first, this is just called the preparation, but it's the whole thing. And then it gets repeated again in the bodhicitta. Only now we're kind of interbeing, inter-knowing nature, and we expand it into the life of the whole planet, right? Where this is like, and we're recognizing that people can become really unintentionally perpetuators of suffering for everyone, for themselves and for everyone. And we start having an increasing aspiration to somehow be able to live in a way that helps beings not do this so much. Okay? So it's aspiration. And then we start to kind of meditate on, where's my ground of being, like my refuge, remembering what my refuge is. And in my little hints, I also give references to books that I've written and other articles and so on. This is like a huge area. Like, these are massive. Making friends with your breathing, and you just take a little detour and do Anapanasati Sutra and 16 stages and all this kind of. You don't need to do that, but these may help. You begin to see there's more to it than meets the eye. Right? The Bodhisattva vow, we start having an increasing warmth to do this. And then don't forget about 4 Bodhisattva vows. Working with one is quite good. Right? Today I'm just meeting beings with kindness and interest. Or today I'm touching difficulties with a little bit more patience and a little bit more love. Right? It's got little things, right? This is, I'm working. It's like, you get a sense, I am working on this. And gradually, as these things start to come together, the Brahma Vihara, the kind of immeasurable loving kindness, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable empathy, you might say, mudita, sympathetic joy, right? And serenity, right? Starts to kind of suffuse, become more and more a texture of your beingness. And then we bring all of this into the essential practice, cultivating a continuity, profoundly nourishing ease, suffused with serene alertness, and allowing everything to rest in its own place. Allow each being that we're meeting. Maybe this has become my practice sometimes for weeks on end. It's like, allow others to rest in their own place. Because I'm constantly trying to get them to be in the place I would like them to be in. Right? And for them to rest in their own place, and for me to appreciate this and allow it, I have to kind of have maybe a kind of an openness to appreciate the possibilities that are there. Changes everything. And then a kind of a dedication, right? And a sharing of the merit. And that's the whole sequence. I invite you to take some of this, to take all of this, to take whatever you like of this, right? And make it your own, right? If you work on this, eventually you may find that you're starting to, there's a phase and you change certain phrases and certain words. Wonderful, right? Maybe that you're, this could be used, for example, as a kind of a process, if you like, for people who are working on their own. But it could also be used, the hints and everything that I'm giving here could be used as as a kind of a support for people who are teaching Dharma and helping others. Right? In a sense, because it kind of reminds you of a framework that kind of covers the whole thing, and then you begin to kind of infuse this with your own direct experience and your own understandings and so on. And it just gives a little bit of something to begin our work, to strengthen our work. So I'd like to thank all the people in Zoomville, right, for joining us again and again and again. Right? And I'd like to thank all you flesh and blood, real humans, humans in this realm, right, for joining us and having the aspiration to bring something beautiful into the world. And I'd like to share one further, we started off by sort of extending the mandala to our friends in other parts of the world. And I'd like to finish the mandala by continuing this process. And earlier this week, Mary and I had the occasion to attend an evening presentation at the local hospice. And there they had people who were nurses and counselors and patients and fundraisers and so on, and they were all speaking about the importance of the hospice to them and how it had touched them deeply. And I was they didn't say anything that I didn't. I mean, I'm a little bit aware of what kind of work they do and so on, and that's why we've been supporting them for a long time. But that part wasn't anything fresh for me. But what I was very moved. I felt really moved listening to these people, and because what I was hearing was sort of so-called ordinary people who had a basic good heart, that there was something just deeply and profoundly engaging for them of being able to be there for people in times of great loss, great stress. I mean, the challenge of one's own death or the death of people that we love is surely the biggest challenge. And, there's kind of the contrast between that and, the stuff that comes across on the news. We're not going to stop the bombing yet, and we're arguing over whether it was a kind of a legal. Is it a war? If it's a war crime to kill people, then that's not good. But if it's not a war crime, then it's okay. Or it's like there's something, to look at the insanity and the incredible suffering that's happening in the world, and yet seeing these people, and one person was describing how they took their father to the beach because they couldn't go anywhere. I mean, they stopped for a soft ice cream at the Big Mac, and somebody else who was like, they were wheeled out, they were having their final days there, they were wheeled out into the garden, and they just sat there in silence and just felt the wind on their skin and the sun and the smell and the sound of the birds. And they didn't say anything. And it was the most marvelous thing in their life. And this is one sense, it's incredibly ordinary. But in another sense, it's incredibly profound and deep. And that is, this being was touching their interconnectedness with life and nature. We yearn for this so deeply, right? And there were beings who kind of recognized that this was actually, the nurse who was describing this situation with the patient, she tried to assure us all that this was actually very profound, in case we didn't realize this, right? You know, because in a sense it's only when you're there, if you've been hospitalized and completely you can't move a muscle and you're in pain and agony. I mean, the first time you get just wheeled to the front, you get wheeled to the front door of the hospital and you go outside and you feel the air on your skin, and it was like, it's like, it's life, right? And so I was reminded again that somehow just ordinary, these were not Buddhist Dharma practitioners or people who were trying to make this a big spiritual thing. They were ordinary people helping ordinary people, but where's something coming forth, which was so beautiful. I felt really touched in the contrast, right? So I was sitting there kind of a bit moist-eyed while they were telling their stories. So ordinary things that did, yeah, but they weren't talking about meditating and preparing themselves for dying and all these kind of things that Buddhists could do. Right? My aspiration is that we could all come to see the Dharma as such an ordinary thing, that it's the center of our life. I'm not talking about Buddhism Dharma. I'm talking about life that holds and supports this mystery that we're birthed into. Right? And so I wish for all of us that our appreciation of this mystery can grow and grow and grow, and that we can occasionally, if not maybe more frequently, have the opportunity to support this growing and flourishing in the hearts of others. Sarvamangalam. 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 Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good.